Welcome to Bloom Today. We have a creative show for you. We're going to be talking about following your calling.
Hi, I'm Paula Wallace, president of Bloom in the Dark, and this is
Ginny Priz, the single-handed Serenity Coach. Welcome to Bloom Today, where we talk about internal and external brokenness and how you can heal,
so that you can use the fertilizer of your past to bloom today. Hey everybody. So today we're talking about choosing our calling and following our calling and being our calling and whatever else it is that
There's nothing really to choose. Don't we always just fall into and do whatever our calling actually is?
Well, I think whatever you're doing by the time you're 20 is what you'll be doing for life. Like,
That's how it should be, right?
Other than Grandma Moses that started painting at 81, or
Moses, who didn't start his ministry or become a leader in the Israelite nation until he was 80.
Yeah. Oh, so you mean we're not automatically stuck in our calling or whatever it is that we're doing when we're younger? We
Right. Actually,
choice.
statistically, these days, people will have actually 5 different careers. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, well, it used to be back when my grandfather was, you signed up with a local company, you started working for them, and then you retired with them.
Right.
At the end of your career.
Right. And it used to be if you were educated in a certain area, that's the direction that you went in, and
no matter what.
Right. But these days, actually, it's a lot of the graduates who are coming out of college are not finding jobs in their education. So they're having to go into all new areas and learn all new skills. So you just never know what's going to happen.
Which makes me feel so much better because in my life, I have been in, I think we're up to 9 different industries.
Wow. So you've broken the mold of even the statistics of 5 different careers.
Yes, because I have either owned a business in an industry ranging from real estate titles to a beauty salon. We have, been a rental landlord and that's kind of like real estate titles, which is great, but then in teaching and in the medical field and in all these
You're
different...
making my head hurt.
Oh yeah, and then let's add plumbing and landscaping.
Right?
At least we have that in common.
We do.
We're landscaping. This should be a garden show. Oh, wait a second, it's a bloom show.
Yeah, well...
So our landscaping is contributing, right?
Somehow, some way. Well, at least we know that our past has affected our present.
It has, but it's a discussion that can really come up with the struggle it can be to find what is my purpose, like a calling that transcends just a job or just a thing to do or just a way to get a paycheck.
Right.
But something that is actually just bigger than that, more meaningful than that. Though sometimes we find that within the job that gets the paycheck.
Sometimes we do.
And sometimes we don't.
And sometimes we have to have the job that has the paycheck, and then we get to do that thing which we feel is our calling afterwards, in our downtime, on the weekends, maybe taking some time off to follow that, whatever that looks like. Everybody's journey looks different, but I think that, and God is creative, and He orchestrates in our lives all these different kinds of ways that our calling can fit into our daily lives. But I think that there's also the idea that, when we are walking and asking Him, where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? And where is my passion? Because God says that we do have God-given passions that are inside us, that we want to have the purpose and contribute to this world the best way that we can. Where does that all intersect? And sometimes it does mean chasing after a dream that doesn't look like the way the world would expect it to look.
Or what other people expect of us.
Absolutely. So has anyone ever expected you to go in a specific direction, Paula?
Yes, I have had people expect me to do all kinds of things, and I have ended up doing something very, very different than anybody's expectations.
So no one expected you to have a television show?
I didn't expect me to have a television show. That's become a reality this year. So this isn't even, by the way, I started this journey a long time ago. No, it was only in the last couple years that I realized that in the Strengths Finder test that my biggest strengths were actually communication, verbal and written. And I was like, oh, that's why God had me write a book, because he's given me this as a gift. But I used to think that communication, verbal and written, were my biggest weaknesses.
Huh.
Funny how that is, right?
Yeah. It's
And-
actually something that God wants to leverage and use because you're actually so good at it.
Well, thank you. And
welcome.
so are you.
Aw. Okay. Enough about our strengths and all of that. But this is something that I feel like God has called me to, and it's certainly not anything that I've expected at all. But it definitely aligns with my passions of helping the hurting
Right.
and wanting people to know that there is more than what the world expects. And it's been a struggle for me to start a ministry and start moving in a completely different direction than the 9 to 5, safe and secure, what the world expects, the idea of the guy in the trench coat with the briefcase and hat going to work every day and then coming home to the family. That I had to put myself in those shoes since I don't have a husband to do it for me.
There you go.
But stepping out of that role was difficult for me to accept and to come to terms with.
There was security in it.
Oh gosh, there's no security in
No, but there's
my calling, but there was a lot of security or worldly security.
and that's just a feeling, because you really can
my
lose jobs,
Right.
and people do get fired and companies do shut down.
Mm-hmm.
But the funny thing is, while we're there, it's easy to say, oh, I'm stable, I'm secure, I have a nice budget, my things are all lined up, everything's great.
Yeah.
But a lot of times that's not necessarily in line with the calling or passion that God has for us. And the funny thing is, when you realize some truth about the calling, about what's possible when you're walking in that passion, and how you can really change the world through your choices like that, anybody can find out what their purpose, what their meaning is, even if it's making baby smile as a babysitter, or being like this morning, the crossing guard at the school zone, and she was dancing as she waved people through, and I was like, oh my goodness, she brightens people's day every single day
Yeah.
by doing what she does that way. Like, it certainly made my morning today so much more joyful to watch her do that. But there's so many places where we don't step out on our calling because of fear.
Oh yeah. Well, the world operates in fear. That's why you see so many people walking through the drudgery of doing the same things, and we're all
And things they
trying
hate to do.
Things they hate to do, and we're all trying to fit into a specific mold. And how are we trying to break out of that mold? And I think actually the millennial generation is breaking out of this a little bit. But I think what we will find with anyone who breaks out of a mold, they tend to just find a new mold.
Right.
And it looks a little different, but it's still a different way to kind of fit into the mainstream, because essentially the world does operate out of fear and that need for security.
Right. And when we start realizing that Scripture gives us the ability to see it differently, to see truth different than our emotions or than just a cultural norms. Ephesians 2:1-2 says, as for you, you were dead in your transgression and sins when you followed the ways of the world and of the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. There's a whole entire world and culture and perspective that sometimes to follow our dreams and calling, we're having to do the countercultural, the opposite of. And you can get a lot of flack for it. You and I have both had a variety of people speak in a more judgmental way about what we're choosing to do because it doesn't look good on our bank accounts, or it doesn't look good. And that we're stirring the pot on issues that other people don't want to talk about or acknowledge. We are going against what most people want about for us, or
what most people are doing, because
That
there's
too.
safety and security in that. And we're going the opposite. We're saying we're not going to operate in the fear that the enemy wants us to operate in.
No.
We're going to step out of that, and we're going to follow what God has asked us to do, baby step by baby step, but we're going to get there.
But there's freedom in that. And that's the second thing. Instead of fear, it is starting to operate out of freedom. And that means not being locked up in fear or brokenness or victimization, not walking in a lifestyle based on bitterness or based in
Just the chains of fear I mean, really, it does feel like we're chained to the mold, or we're chained to doing something specific. The expectations. That so
Like the
many people
American
can have.
dream. So if my lifestyle is not giving me the financial stability and freedom because I'm choosing to do ministry in a way that doesn't bring in all this money,
Right.
then that means that I'm doing something wrong and I'm not in alignment with the American dream.
Right.
My retirement account, oh wait, what is that? Like there is no retirement plan at this point, but I get the opportunity to step out and work to change the world instead.
And break free from that. Colossians 1:13 says, "He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son." So there, just like this idea of there are two kinds of kingdoms at work, and even though, like I said earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has to buck the whole system to follow their calling.
Just us, right?
But there are just there's family expectations, and there's other worldly expectations that you may not have to follow in order to walk into the kingdom and then walk into the calling that God has had for you or placed on your heart.
Well, because God has a specific plan, I think, that He's given us gifts, He's given us talents, He's given us abilities that lend themselves to being spectacular sometimes in a specific area. And recognizing that your design can be specifically for something maybe like major, mind-blowing.
Setting other captives free. Even if you're just choosing your passion, you have the opportunity to help other people in that passion as well. Even if you're not actively helping people on a daily basis with your hands or your words, even if you are just being the light, your example, the example that you set has the ability to illustrate what is available for other people.
Like I said, the crossing guard, dancing.
First
thing in the morning as she's directing traffic with the bus stop for the school. You know, that wasn't that she was out there doing some whatever, but she was changing her world around her through just doing what she did with her talent, her music, her way of showing life and joy first thing in the morning. That was so cool.
Absolutely. And I love what Jesus said on the cross in John 17:14-15 says, "I have given them your word, and the world has hated them, for they are not of the world any more than I am of the world. My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one." So, meaning that we can be in this world in the middle of everyone else, and it's not that we're asked to necessarily change everything or come out of it for any reason, but to change it from within.
Right, and today's a really neat way to do that because not only will people have a coaching tool, we do have a coaching tool.
We absolutely have a coaching tool. If you'd like to access that coaching tool, you can go to our website. You can go to bloomtodaytv.com, and you can download that tool. It's a couple sheets of paper, which will go through the lesson we've just talked about, and it will also give you some baby steps and some questions to help you apply this to your life, to step out and follow your calling a little bit more closely.
That's awesome, and I'm so excited about our guest today because I met him a couple years ago, and he's an artist whose art has just completely blown me away.
Yeah, we've actually had a piece on the show already.
Yes,
so
and
I'm excited to have him
because
here.
we can't help it. But he's actually going to be here and get to share a little bit about his journey into creating this art. And I'm super, super excited.
Yeah, let's bring him on. Stephen Sawyer, will you please join us in the kitchen?
Do you mind giving him a hand, Jenny?
Not at all, Stephen. This hand's for you.
And now for an awkward moment of silence. Nice grip.
Thank you.
Yes.
I work really hard on that. Thank you for joining us, Stephen.
Thank
It's
you.
great to have you. We've put some of your art on display here previously, and so to have you here in person is just a real treat for us.
Thank you.
And speaking of changing the world with our callings and whatever, you didn't start painting this stuff like at 5 years old, right?
Well, not that.
Not this stuff. You didn't paint these paintings like instantly, as a toddler.
No, but I did find out early on in kindergarten that my stickmen were apparently superior.
I believe that.
Well, yeah, there were two little guys. They were arguing over whose art was better, and they came to me, and I was supposed to tell them which one was better, and I had one of those little junior aha moments, like, So I did what I think a lot of us do. I followed my applause. If people said, "Wow, that's a really nice piece of art," well, I wanted to, keep being part of something that helped me feel good about myself, right? Because nobody, I was like always the last one picked to play football or basketball or anything like that. So yeah, art fit really well into my life.
But you weren't always an artist for your profession.
No. But I was always an artist. In retrospect, looking back, as I say, it makes all makes sense. But in college, going through elementary, junior high, high school, and college, I always would volunteer to do art for Christmas or Thanksgiving or for concerts or anything, because I wanted to, it was an interesting little way to serve with the talent that you've been given, right? And in college, I started out in architecture, and I kind of fit in, kind of didn't. Went to engineering, did not fit in. So I graduated with a Bachelor of General Studies, just so I could finish and say I
Finishing's
completed, because I had so many hours from so many diverse areas. So,
Right.
And then the journey of becoming an artist actually really started, because I had forsaken the traditional view of what was expected of me with a brilliant engineer father.
So is that originally why you chose engineering?
Well, actually, he suggested architecture because he thought maybe that would satisfy maybe what I inherited and from him, as well as the creative part. So
Okay.
I gave it a good shot. I enjoyed. I mean, I still have benefited from what I learned in architecture, and engineering, and everything else I studied. But once you know you are who you are, then you got to stop being who you aren't, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So then I had to figure out how to become an artist.
Aha.
Yeah, that was fun.
So
College, I took only, I think, 4 art classes, and
wow.
apparently they had no clue as to how to make a living, because if I'd gone to the College of Fine Arts, which I didn't really care for, because it seemed like the options at that time were you can become a professor and you can teach art,
Right.
and then you can do art, but they weren't really, that wasn't making a living in my eyes. I wanted to know how to make a living as an artist. So
So the starving artist concept was
do I
actually...
look like I'm starving?
No, you don't actually.
Don't say anything. No, there was one of the greatest things that ever happened was marrying Cindy, because now it's been over 43 years, but she never told me to get a job. She never doubted me. She always believed in me, and
Wow.
I attribute a huge part of my success to not having to fight at home over, over what looked right. It's like, how much money do you make, or things like that. And we certainly have had some really good years, some spectacular years, but it's a lot like a roller coaster. If you like to
Yeah.
ride, it's
Well,
awesome.
Yeah. Right.
If you want to go around the merry-go-round, then
Yeah.
it's the same thing. Just kind of go up and down and up and down. But if you want a great ride, then you find who you are and
Chase after that.
yeah.
So
and
how
give it
did
your
you
best shot.
how did you go from just being an artist to now I know a large body of your work? You're actually painting images of Christ, of Jesus, and what inspired you to go down that path?
Early on as a young person, I think when I was 5, I was absolutely convinced, because of one experience, that God was real, and didn't really know, quite what to do with that. But I never wavered from that. I have taken some scenic bypasses,
Haven't we all?
But-
Yeah, right.
but there was never any doubt that God was real, and so really in kindergarten, the same time that this little sprout of art is growing, this little sprout of God is growing. And I suppose it was 1975. I was a lifeguard at the Playboy Club in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, where my precious wife was also working as a bunny. And I was in the basement of the cafeteria and reading, because God, as soon as I got out of college, it was like reading all of a sudden was fun.
Right.
Yeah, it's like
When you don't have
the
to.
exam is in 5 minutes and you've been up all night. You know, and I'd always loved different aspects of spirituality, and I was always more interested in trying to find what we had in common than finding out what our differences were, which always has that us and them mentality.
Right.
And you know, we do it right and you do it wrong. And so by the time I'd gone to college, I'd probably been to 15, 20 different churches, synagogues, stuff with my friends in high school. And then by the time I was in college, I became an ordained Buddhist. And after I got out of college and studied esoteric things and the pagan religions, because it's like there's a lot of information in there. And it's like, do you just want to have your blinders on and go, this is what I know and this is what I believe and this is all I will know and believe? And it didn't seem like a well-rounded education.
Yeah, well,
And-
God can
Oh,
take
yeah.
it too. I
Well,
mean,
he can.
he's like, you keep searching, you're
Yeah,
gonna find.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
and so
what's true and what's not.
I actually have I've worshipped with Muslims and Hindus and Jews and Buddhists and North American Indians and.
So then, why did you choose Jesus then?
Well, at that very moment in the basement of the Playboy Club, I was reading something that said it was beautifully stated, more so than I can probably do, but it just said it's such a shame that the 20th century artists have not been able to portray Jesus showing his humor, his mercy, his compassion, just all these things about the human Jesus, which unfortunately in the roller coaster ride of Christianity, the human Jesus was in the very back car and the glorified and risen Christ was in the front of the car, you know, and it's like, well, what about the one people fell in love with?
But there's the baby too, and all these stages, but not the one you could
Christ on the
relate
cross,
to.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, the one that walked among us, and sometimes it felt like that the human Jesus had been taken away from us, and so we ended up with what I kind of called the touch me not Jesus, you know, the unattainable, the
Right.
glorified, the risen, the one that's hanging on the cross. It's like, but there was so much between his birth and his death and resurrection that also changed the world, and so.
But they're focusing on the icon
Well,
instead of
yeah, and the iconography was an important part of the teaching lesson, right? I mean,
Yes.
the Catholic Church was probably the first great sponsor of
art.
of art. And the crucified and resurrected Christ was a big part of their message, because early on it seemed like it was easier to get people to choose God or Jesus out of fear, right?
Right.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
get to that fear thing I heard you talking about. You know, and it's like, well, if I don't believe this, I'm going to go to hell. And, you know, it was a pretty good whipping stick. But the more people know the human Jesus, the more you realize how much mercy
compassion.
and compassion actually trump judgment.
Yes.
Because mercy always has the last card.
Which I want to highlight my absolute most favorite
Yeah.
piece, and most people's favorite of yours. Like, this is such an iconic statement.
Calvary.
Yeah.
That's Calvary, and in it we're actually showing Christ there meeting us in our most broken place.
Right, because it says in several places things like, I will never leave you or forsake you. And in all of your afflictions, I am also afflicted.
And neither height nor depth nor
Yeah.
anything
Yeah,
will
yeah, yeah.
interfere with my love for you. Like, there's so many places where he shows us when I was getting raped as a 5-year-old, it broke his heart, but he didn't abandon me
Right.
during that. You
That's
know,
why I painted Broken Dolls, right?
Right, and that's
Yeah.
again portraying visually that heart that meets us in that place, the real compassionate, warm, loving, heartbroken
Yeah.
Jesus that isn't an icon.
Yeah.
It's the real living I can build a relationship with instead of just the religion thing
Right.
that seems to
Yeah.
supersede a lot of other people's
Yeah, the
perspectives.
religion about Jesus.
Right.
And have you gotten, by the way, I mean, do you receive from people messages, or do people speak to you about how your art has touched them?
Yes, thank you. It'd be more fun to let them say it instead of me because it has made every struggle worthwhile. It has
Yeah.
made every sacrifice just a down payment on the life I want to live. And some of the stories are truly remarkable. My favorites are just simply that people feel like they're getting to have an experience with Jesus the man,
Right.
not just Jesus the Christ, you know? And
Right.
I mean, he's both. He ascended on high not only as God, but as a man. He took that with him, and that will forever be part of him. And that means it's really important that we not lose the opportunity to learn more about Jesus the man. And so, Art for God, that's the mission statement, to reflect the life and teachings of Jesus.
And to represent that in a way that touches our hearts and souls, because art has like a direct access to our hearts, to our emotions, to
Speed of light, baby.
It does. It just
Yeah.
Worth a
picture's
thousand
worth-
words.
That's right. Speed of sound, you can
Totally.
block it out, but the speed of light's too late.
Yep, you've already seen it.
You've seen it, can't unsee it. So,
And that does affect how we see ourselves, how we see others, how we see the world, how we see Christ. All of that plays in together. And having the opportunity to see your art and how that's touched me, having the opportunity to share it with others. And I know you've traveled the world, and I know you've done these interviews and whatever, and spoken this all over the place. But to have your art be something that we can share with people who are hurting and broken and devastated and don't feel understood is so powerful, which is why we're giving you our prize for the
The
day.
ex-victim of the week. Thank you so much, Stephen.
I'd like to thank my manager. I don't have one of those.
Well, your wife.
Do we have any time left?
Not really.
Not really?
Not too much, no.
Oh, boo, because I wanted to mention something very, very quickly, because you're talking about fear, and bottom line, it kind of relates to fear of the unknown.
Right.
And for God's sake, people, if we knew what was going to happen, we wouldn't need faith.
Amen.
So you know, it's important. Fear's
Thank you.
not bad.
Bloom today?
Absolutely. Bloom today.
A free PDF copy of the Bloom in the Dark book and a full list of Bloom Today's coaching tools can be found on bloomtodaytv.com. Then visit Bloom Today's Facebook group for deeper conversation.